Hey guys, and welcome to another First Impressions video, the video game series in which we look at a recently released game and I give you my first thoughts and impressions on it. Today we are looking at the early access title Super Dungeon Maker, which is a top-down pixel art style dungeon maker and dungeon crawler. So far it's pretty good, although I feel that I am just simply not good enough at the game or creative enough to really get this game's full potential. Obviously things are subject to change with this title, but so far I am quite impressed. There are a few things that are not wrong with it, but slight annoyances so far. Namely that there isn't like a menu or a start screen as such. It's just this one, and the second you press the key it takes you straight into the game. Doesn't really explain anything or explain how anything works. It just kind of dumps you in and you're kind of left to figure it out for yourself. So some form of a tutorial would be advantageous. That being said though, I will go through the options and what there is available in the game, and then I'll take you to each different section that's available and show you what each thing does. There is a lot that I haven't unlocked yet. This is, you know, there's a lot to unpack in a very small game. So let's not waste any more time. Let's jump straight into it, shall we? Alright then, so your options screen. There really isn't a lot here, but again, it's a fairly low-res sort of 8-bit style game, so there's not a huge graphic tax on your system. You've got your volume here. Your different volumes, there's actually quite a few there, which is nice. It does start it on whack, but the volume isn't actually all that bad. Your graphic settings are non-existent. It also apparently doesn't save your graphic settings when you exit out the game. It starts them on the maximum, and there's really no point in doing that on a screen that only goes to 1080. And then you've got resume and exit. That's literally your lot. There's not a lot to discuss with the options, to be honest, but there are a few game modes and different things that you can do and try out and see within the actual game itself. So we're going to do that first. We'll look at the dungeon builder, and then we'll look at the trial run to see other dungeons that people have made and the bog standard dungeon that it starts you in as well. Alright then, so this is the dungeons page that you can make. And it really does have everything. But again, like a lot of things with this game, it doesn't explain anything. It doesn't really tell you what anything does. And without a tutorial or tooltips, it can be a bit difficult to try and figure out what it is you're doing and what each thing does and what each item does and how it interacts. But there is a lot here that you can do, and there's a large space, so you can really make the dungeon as large or as small as you so desire. For example, if we just put that down there, there's like a room, and then you can split it and go wherever you want and do whatever you want, and it will essentially make a room that you have to therefore traverse, if you will. And then you've got your traps that you can do somewhere, don't ask me where. You've got items that you can drop in, so you can put obstacles to get in the way of things. You can put more blocks down that can't be removed. And then you can enter treasure chests and put them behind things. And then you can put enemies in. So it's a full dungeon builder as such. But again, there's no structure with it. I love the fact that it's just like, here you go, but it would be nice if it explained what each thing does and how it interacts, and maybe give a tutorial for those of us that aren't used to making dungeons, especially ones from scratch with no blueprint. So giving you an idea of, here's how to make a corridor. Once you've made your corridor, you can then add this, this, and this, and it's just something that would add an extra layer. And because of the way that they've done the game so far, it would be really interesting and very easy to just say that it's an optional tutorial. You can jump in and say, okay, I want to learn how to do this, and you just choose it from an option menu and it would jump you straight in. So the dungeon building aspect is very good. I'm no good at it, but it is very good. There's a lot here that you can choose from. There's, you know, different room tiles and things that you can do. You can make black holes, or, you know, there's tons of options. And I love the fact that you can literally do anything you want, and then you can save it and move on from there. You can turn the brightness down of each. You can, you know, you can do anything, and that's really what you want from a dungeon builder like this. Let's have a look at what else you can do, and let's look at some dungeons that people have done that are much better than the shit for brains thing that I've done here. Okay, so if you're not really up for making your own dungeon, you can scroll here and you can see ones that other people have made. And as you can see, there's already quite a few here, which is kind of awesome. Shows you something. I don't know what a lot of these symbols are. It doesn't really explain. I assume that's how many people have tried it, how many people have hearted it, how many times they've died. I don't know. There's not really any tooltips, like I say, so you are kind of left to just kind of figure it out for yourself. Then you've got, you know, a lot of fun. These ones are named and stuff. You've got it looks like they are categorized, I guess. We're figuring this out together, guys. And then you can, you know, search for anyone that you sort of desire. So the dungeon search feature is pretty good, but again, please give us some sort of tooltips or something that tells us what each one is, because it makes it very daunting for the player to try and figure out what they're doing. Now I'm going to show you the world where you walk around, and there's more things to unlock that I haven't done yet, and then we'll jump into an actual dungeon and show you how the gameplay is for actually trying out your dungeons and seeing what they're like. Okay, so they're the two main features of this game, but as you walk across, you can see that there are other characters to interact with that will give you hints and tips as you go along. There are houses which I don't quite know how you're supposed to get into, but you've got this vast world that has entrances to dungeons, as well as, like I say, the people with tips and hints and stuff like that, and also the two places that you can go to either make a dungeon or try somebody else's dungeon out. And I really like the way they've done this. It's like a big main hub of a town with varying difficulty dungeons. Now the problem is that when you first play this game, it doesn't start you here like you would expect it to. It starts you directly in a dungeon, so you just kind of left to figure it out again. There's no text to tell you where you are. There's nothing to tell you what you're doing. You just kind of left to it. And whilst I appreciate that not everybody wants a game that holds their hand, having a game that gives you at least a little bit of direction would, for me at least, make it a lot more playable. I like the animations of this. I like the movement, although with some of the enemies, as you're about to see later, the movement is a real issue, considering it's keyboard only. You can't use your controller with it. I don't know if they're going to implement a change to make that it is controller viable or not, but honestly, if they did, it would open up the gameplay a hell of a lot more. But this is the main hub area. Pretty damn good. It's fairly expansive. I'm fairly impressed. Let's go into a dungeon and see what the dungeon running and what the combat and stuff is like. Alright, so this is the first starting dungeon, if you like, the easiest dungeon in the game, I would assume. That is, I assume, designed to give you an indication of how the game actually works. You can exit the dungeon at any given time, but unless you get to certain points, I would assume that you don't actually keep anything. It's very roguelike in that sense. So if you leave the dungeon to do something else, you will lose all of the loot and stuff that you've gained up until this point. So, you move around. These grassy areas can be cut away, and you can sometimes find like extra hearts or items in them, depending on whether it's a dungeon that's been made by somebody else, or like this one, the starting dungeon that you go in. You gain extra hearts for doing that as well, apparently. But as you can see, the combat is pretty straightforward. You've just got a sword. You can gain extra items as you walk through the dungeon and find things, and you can pick up items and throw them. You will need to do that in order to move around some of these dungeons, but you can also use them as a weapon as a result. Now, there is a slight issue with the combat, and that is that it's very difficult to go against enemies that throw things at you. And the reason why I say that is because you've only got the keyboard W, A, S, and D, whereas the enemies seem to be able to move in a three-dimensional way. And enemies that throw items at you, when you can only go up, down, left, and right, is a problem. It means that you take hits that you wouldn't normally take because you can see the item coming at you. You can see the thing that they are throwing at you, but you physically can't react in time because you've got that four-dimensional movement. So that is a bit of a problem. If you can get around that, and I'm sure there's people that are going to be plenty skilled enough to be able to do that, the other issue is that your movement is greatly and very significantly slowed down when you start to attack, which means if you're trying to go against multiple enemies, especially if one is ranged, you're going to be at a severe disadvantage. Now, early on in this game, early on in this dungeon, that doesn't really happen. You've got like one or two enemies that are trying to kill you, but on the whole, it is just one or two, so it's not a problem. But then later on, you do tend to find that you've got two, maybe three enemies coming at you, and you are at a serious disadvantage if you try and attack them. That being said, I don't know if there's going to be an item in game that speeds up your attack speed or speeds up your movement whilst attacking. If not, that would be a great item for them to add, a nice little power up as you go through the dungeon, just to make life a little bit easier for you. Other than that, the combat is very simplistic. It's very straightforward. It's slash, and then you can later on get a shield, which will enable you to try and defend. You've also got puzzles to work out, although they are very simplistic. You know, there's nothing too majorly sort of complicated. It's either make sure you are, you know, hitting the right thing to make the sort of the sides or the thing that's blocking your path go down, but it will make another path become blocked, which is fair. And obviously certain times you've got to kill the enemies before you can move on. Items and stuff do reset when you leave a room and come back in. So if you destroy all of the pots, for example, then you will find that the pots will respawn. Enemies, however, don't seem to, which is good. Now, this is our first ranged enemy, and as you can see, I'm going to struggle quite a lot here because they do get knocked back when you hit them with their sword. And if you're not careful, you will lose a lot of hearts and therefore die. When you die, you go back to the beginning of the dungeon, which isn't really ideal. I don't know if there's going to be save points in the dungeons later on, but for now at least, there's not really a lot you can do. And that is Super Dungeon Maker. That is everything there is to know about it. You've got your shield, you've got your sword, you've got things to find, and you just kind of got to go through and make your way through the dungeons and then make your own dungeons and see where you end up. Thank you very much for watching, guys, and I hope to see you all next time. Don't forget to leave a comment in those comments down below. As you can see here as well, real quickly before I die, the two enemies is a problem. So yes, leave a comment in those comments down below. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you feel the game does need a tutorial or some tooltips at the very least. And yeah, thank you very much for watching. I hope to see you all next time. Ciao, ciao.